Good morning, and thank you for taking the time to join us today. My name is Karen Rutledge. I'm a senior investment advisor and associate portfolio manager with the Wagner Investment Management team. Today, I'm joined by some of our team members. I have Patty Dolan, senior wealth advisor and portfolio manager. I also have Mike Trotman, senior investment associate, and Rena Kadri, associate. Today, we're excited to present you with our Aging in Place webinar. For those of you joining us today from Calgary, obviously it's quite smoky out there. It brought me back memories of the pandemic as we see people out in masks. And I just wanted to say that our thoughts and prayers are with those who are fighting the fires in Alberta today. Seeing people around in masks again brought memories of the pandemic to me, which really highlighted aging in place. And so what we saw throughout the pandemic was kind of a renewed invigoration and discussion around options as it relates to staying in our current home for as long as possible. So we wanted to make sure that we highlighted some of the features and options available as it relates to aging in place. In terms of today's agenda, we are excited to have a guest speaker join us today to highlight aging in place. We also wanted to take a few moments to highlight as a team how we can help as it relates as well. In terms of housekeeping items for today, just important to keep in mind that there is a Q&A feature on the screen. So please feel free to submit any questions throughout the webinar. We will stop at the end and pause for questions. So just be aware that you can submit questions if you have them. Now I'm going to turn it over to Patty to introduce our guest speaker.
Hi and welcome. I thought I'd just start out because it's kind of timely. I just went through the process of selling my home that had 37 stairs in it and just bought a bungalow. And the whole concept was aging in place. And if you had been on a previous webinar that we had, I mentioned the story behind my husband who had a stroke and he has mobility issues. So the focus was moving into a place that would accommodate all of our needs currently and into the future. And so the conversation came up, and I know Karen quite well from past experience. So we asked Karen to do the presentation today. So I thought I'd just give you a quick introduction about Karen. As I said, we know each other for quite some time. We served on a board in the past, and I know her passion for everything that she does. So Karen currently is senior leadership with Unison at the Kirby Center. And I'm going to have Karen explain the name change around Unison and the Kirby Center, because it's quite a fascinating reason why they did this. So she was originally the director of programs, and they have several programs at Unison currently. They have an elder abuse program, adult day programs, wellness connection, Thrive food security. So that's a food bank for seniors, and they actually deliver out food to seniors in the community. Information resource. The day that I was there visiting Karen, they had a luncheon and they had a live band. And so everyone was up dancing, and it was quite a lively little spot at noon hour in downtown Calgary. So tip to those that are looking at something to do on a Wednesday, check it out. So Karen brings her extensive background to her new position, and she was with Innovative Partnerships. She had experience with CCVO, which is the volunteer organization here in Calgary. She was also with Alberta Promise, and Alberta Promise works with small businesses and giving back to the community. And Karen also founded an organization called Flywheel Pro Bono Consulting. And so they work with small not-for-profits and improving their systems. And in her spare time, she's a sessional lecturer at the University of Lethbridge. So we really appreciate Karen taking time out today to do this webinar for us. And I'll let you take over and do the presentation. Thanks.
Thanks, Patty. Yeah, all that spare time, I actually volunteer with the Calgary Stampede and a couple of boards as well. But you know what they say about giving a busy person. So anyway, Unison. So probably know the organization formerly as Kirby Center. As Patty said, we went through a rebranding. And one of the reasons we went through a rebranding is that George Kirby, who our building is named after, actually has nothing to do with our organization. He was actually one of the founders of Mount Royal College. And so the building that we're in is called the Kirby Memorial Building. And so the Kirby actually is named after him simply because that was a place name. As we grow as an organization, we also work in Medicine Hat and other satellites throughout the city. We decided that it would be better to have a name that better reflected the work that we're doing. And the work that we're doing is working in unison to support older adults 50 and over in our communities, wherever those communities are. We do a lot of online work as well. So we're a nonprofit charitable organization in Calgary, and we're celebrating our 50th anniversary this year of the founding of our organization. So we're very excited. So thank you for having me, and I'll get straight to the presentation because that's why you're here. So let's talk a little bit about aging in place and what it means. So aging in place is making sure that you have supports that you need to live safely in your home or your community for as long as you want to. And we really want to emphasize the fact that it's you that is in control of this, not us making a decision or any of us making a decision for somebody else. So ensuring that you can live in your home. So we need to do a lot of planning around this. And as Patty stated, sometimes we plan sooner and sometimes we plan later. I'm getting a little better at planning sooner, having been through this with my father as well. So here are some things we want to start thinking about. How do you want to live as you age? Are you going to be a snowbird? Are you going to stay in Calgary or wherever you happen to be residing now? What steps do you need to have that kind of lifestyle? And what are some of the unexpected things that can happen? And what happens if you suddenly had a chronic illness, a disability, or a change in resources? Those are all critical questions. So think about your house. If I want to stay in the house that I'm living in now, what modifications would it need so that I could stay safe? Are you in a two-story? As Patty said, was it 37 or 47 stairs she had in her house? Not very conducive if you have somebody with mobility issues. How can I maintain my house? For a lot of people, they wonder, how am I going to mow the grass? How am I going to keep the lawn up? Can I get that stuff done? Do I have the money to pay for it if I do need to get that done? My mother-in-law always had somebody coming in Jasper to mow her lawn for her so that she could continue to stay in her home. Do I need to move to a more manageable home? Maybe a smaller footprint, maybe a home without stairs. And what are the housing costs? What are the options if I decide to move? Do I need to move right away into a senior's home? Perhaps not, and that's part of the discussion. What about your community? So Calgary is a very car-focused community or city. And so how do we make sure that the community that we're living in, we can actually have good sidewalks? I know that some of the newer neighborhoods that I've been through, there are no sidewalks. There's sidewalks only on one side. What happens when it's icy? Is there a group mailbox? All those kind of things. What's in the area? So can I go shopping? Can I go for my healthcare supports? Is there a doctor or pharmacy within a reasonable distance? And how am I going to keep myself busy, the recreational activities? Do I need to move to a community? And again, I'm not saying community in this case is not the city of Calgary. Community is where you live and what you consider to be your community. So I want to really clarify that. When we talk about community, it's the space that you're in. So do I need to move to an area that might be more elder friendly? And am I close to the supports and services that I need now or that I might need in the future? One thing we know is that we're not getting younger. And is there any assistance from the government or other agencies that support me in this journey? Because it is quite the journey and it's a bit scary. Some other things to think about. Again, I said Calgary is very car focused. So for most people, that involves driving to the drugstore, driving to the grocery store, driving to the doctor. What happens if for some reason you can no longer drive? So think about what those kind of impacts can be. And you may never be in that situation. But you want to make sure that you've considered that as you age in place. What are the other transportation options? If you're well off and you can use Uber whenever you want to go somewhere, that's great. If you're not well off, is there public transportation? I live in Charleswood. I'm 2 blocks from the C train station. So not that I was that clever when I bought the house 25 years ago, but it makes sense to be that close to the train station so that I can actually get to everything I need to. I actually live in a bungalow too, so I must have been preparing for age long before I got there. There is no place like home. And in fact, when we look at people over the age of 45, 73% of people plan to retire in their current residence. 41% plan to stay in their homes until they're 81 or older. And I bet if I was able to do a survey now and say, how many of you would actually want to be in your own home as you age? I would say the majority of you would be there. And we see that all the time here at Unison, where people are in their own homes. So what are the supports and things we can put in place so that people can stay in their own homes? It's a place of safety. It's a place of where we feel comfortable. Here's a great summary. People who can stay in their homes successfully are happier, it's cheaper, they live longer, and it makes for a better community. One of the changes that we're seeing in our little community in Charleswood is new families coming in. And I'm not that old, but it's still fun to see little kids playing on the cul-de-sac and that rejuvenation. And I remember with my parents, they bought a house kitty corner from a bus stop and a playground. And that was a deliberate decision so that when the bus stopped, they were out in their front yard and all the little kids would wave when they went by, or they were on their way to soccer. So my dad would walk the dog so we could go and watch soccer. So keeping that in mind, that's a critical part of keeping us safe and healthy in place. So I've been talking about socialization, and I know that when Karen was talking about the pandemic, social isolation was brutal, especially for our older adults. So what can we do to make sure that people aren't isolated? Because being together and it increases your well-being, gives you a sense of purpose, lets you focus on the joy of living. And loneliness is actually the #1 cause of death among seniors. Care support and psychological support. So making sure that you have a network of family members or caregivers and a safe home to live in are critical parts to aging in place. We had a little old lady on our street, and she was old, named Frida. And Frida had this big driveway and a big sidewalk. And our little cul-de-sac, it would be a race on snow days to see who could do Frida's walks first. So that's when you have that kind of supports in place. And she knew she was looked after, and so did her family. And after she passed away, the family actually mentioned that to us. So what are some home modifications you can do because you don't want to leave your home? Sometimes our physical strength may diminish, and some things that were really easy in the house suddenly become more difficult. Might be changing your water faucet. Maybe it's an automatic turn on, turn off water faucet. We installed those in our elder abuse shelter so that people who had difficulties with arthritis could actually turn on the faucets without any extra work. Climate controls. Many of the homes that older adults live in have the old-fashioned thermometer. And maybe we should be having larger displays or remote controls. I know that you had somebody talk about caregiving, and sometimes that's a way that somebody can be a caregiver, is making sure that the house is the proper temperature. Making sure that there's computer equipment with large screen monitors and oversized keyboards. Again, big light switches and levers. Grab bars in bathrooms and hallways. Interestingly, my husband had a fall on his last trip to Australia, not a major fall, but his ribs are really sore. And he actually wished at the age of 65 that we had lots of grab bars in our house. So it's not necessarily an age thing. It can be something as simple as that. Lighting. One of the issues that we see is that as we become older, sometimes our vision isn't as good, especially, when you're walking around your house, you want to make sure the lighting is really good. Pull out shelves. I don't know if you've ever done this, but just the other day I was reaching to a top shelf in my cupboard and pulled down 5 plates and smashed them all because I should have had a pull-out shelf with a stool instead of trying to stand on my tippy toes. Can you imagine if I was your 80-year-old mother or your 80-year-old self? Again, push button door openers. Security systems. Smoothing floor surfaces. And I'm going to show you some pictures around that, but making sure that carpeting, for example, as much as that big area rug looks beautiful, is it the most practical thing if you get up in the middle of the night and don't bother to turn on the light? Stair lifts, and I'll show you a picture of one of those. Again, non-skid strips, putting those in your bathroom or your shower, but anywhere. Sometimes you want to just put it on the edge of a stair to actually let people see where the edge of the stair is, because otherwise it just blends in with the rest of the floor. Transfer benches, those are the benches that you use in showers and bathtubs. Walk-in tubs. I'm not saying you have to do all of this. Please don't anybody panic. These are just all the ideas that you might say, yeah, we need that. We actually made our shower so it's a walk-in shower, so there's no bathtub with it, so that was easier for us to use that. Ramps, widening doorways and hallways. So you don't always have to move out. So here's a couple of examples. You can see the stair lift right here, right? And you can see the ramp. And I was joking about the fact that the advantage of the ramp is that when you're taking your grandchildren out in the stroller, then you can come back and wheel them right into your house. So it's not necessarily just about those of us who are aging or people in wheelchairs. It just makes it easier for all of us. Again, getting rid of some throw rugs, putting railings on your stairs. And I love throw rugs, don't get me wrong. It's just a matter of safety. The grab bars. I really like this toilet paper holder because it's a grab bar, but it doesn't look like a grab bar. So you can kind of have it make it look like it's just a decorative piece, but in fact, it's solid enough to be a grab bar in your bathroom. Access to help. We've all seen those medical alert bracelets and pendants. That is an option. In-house sensory systems. Home phones and smartphones. I know with my dad, I had a big phone and it had pictures on it. So he couldn't dial phone numbers anymore, but he knew that if he pushed the button that had my face on it, he had dementia, but he recognized my face, he knew he would get me. So those are just really simple things, but make such a difference. Telehealth systems. So again, ensuring that you can set things up so that you can meet with doctors and nurses without necessarily having to go into the office. And I know the pandemic has forced us into a lot of those things already. So it's gratefully, if we can be grateful for anything, it's moved us along a system where perhaps we wouldn't have moved had it not been necessary. Smoke and carbon monoxide detectors. So the fancy thing about this one, it doesn't look that fancy, but it also will inform you if you're the caregiver or somebody else outside of the person's home that the smoke alarm or carbon monoxide detector's gone off. I know again with my father, if something like that happened, he would have just unplugged it. Would have gotten on a chair and unplugged it and said there's this annoying beeping sound. So again, for peace of mind, and some of this is maybe it's kind of selfish, but for those of us who are the children, it's peace of mind for us as well as for the senior. Automating lighting. Again, making sure that the lighting is good. And so when you or mom or dad gets up to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night, and trust me, that will happen, you will have the light just going on automatically. I said the programmable thermostat actually saves you money too. Your security system. I have a friend, and I don't know whether I'd recommend this or not, but he has a camera in his mom's apartment so that he can make sure that she's okay all the time. Honestly, I felt a little creeped out by it when he was describing this to me, but he and his mom agreed it was a good idea, so I guess that's none of my business. What about in your kitchen? As I talked about the pull-out drawers, making sure that the essential stuff is at the lower level, right? So you don't have to get on a stool to get everyday things. On lower shelves, have cabinets that have the pull-out storage. Put things in a drawer, pots and pans. And again, these are modifications that are practical for us as we age, but honestly, I think they're practical anyway. Under cabinet lighting and lighting above the sink and stove. Sinks without counters underneath allow wheelchairs easy access. It's something you hadn't thought of, but if you're having challenges getting to the sink, if you have cabinetry underneath, what happens? You can't get right up to the sink. So that might be the person in the wheelchair's excuse not to do the dishes. But on the other hand, it'd be nice to make it accessible for them. It's more inclusive. So again, think about things and adopt a long-term approach. Here's a couple of great examples. If you're looking at your front walkway and it's starting to break up, think about, should we actually replace the steps with a ramp? If I'm going to have to do it anyway, why not do it now? So that we're not spending money, perhaps at a time when money is a little harder to come by. Again, steps, if you're going to use steps, make sure that the railings are solid. I don't know about you, but I've gone to lots of houses where you grab a hold of the railing and that thing just kind of wiggles and moves around a little bit. So making sure that you really have good railings. So here's one of the questions that people talk about wheelchairs, and I kind of dealt with this a little bit already, is not necessarily about a wheelchair. What about a stroller? What about, you've got something for a short period of time? My husband broke his leg in his 40s. And so it would have been really handy to have a ramp rather than the 4 steps to the front of our bungalow. So keeping that in mind. So it's not just necessarily about wheelchairs. So taking your grandchildren for a stroll, wheeling your luggage right to the car from the living room. Grocery shopping. Can you imagine if you could actually just load your groceries and wheel it right into the kitchen? So I like this, think wheels, not wheelchairs. So rethinking about what your house looks like. So you may have a lot of stairs. You may not be able to rip them out, or it might wreck the whole house and you're not ready to sell. Maybe you want to move your laundry room out of the basement where a lot of them are to a level, perhaps the main level where you're doing a lot of your laundry and living in general. You can move it there. Making sure that your half bath on the main floor, maybe you put a shower in there as well, so that should the time come when you want to actually spend all your time on that floor, you don't have to go upstairs or downstairs to go to the bathroom. They're so incredibly practical. You could convert a first floor room into the master bedroom if you have a second floor or a 2-story house. Convert the closet into a bathroom. Keep in mind that when you're planning this stuff, don't necessarily go cheap, because it's not just about the budget. It's about how much longer you're going to be in your house. I think Patty mentioned the word, I don't know if it was on the call or prior to, about the forever home. And looking at, I'm investing this money in my house because I plan on being here for a long time. And so keeping that in mind. Get a professional contractor and get input from a caregiver. And we're talking about a caregiver. It could be a family member. It could be somebody who is an expert in planning aging in place modifications, but consult someone. This is a big investment in the rest of your life, so please consult someone. Making sure that you have high-speed internet, because as we know, as an experience, the pandemic, people who did not have high-speed internet really felt like they were left out of a lot of things. And so making sure that that's part of the new technology you install. So there are some financial assistance for lower income seniors. The Seniors Home Adaptation and Repair Program, or SHARP, offers home equity loans to people 65 and over who have an annual income of $75,000 or less. So they can make a loan, and it's a home equity loan, meaning it gets paid back, excuse me, sorry, gets paid back when the home is sold. So here are some of the things that are covered under that: roof and windows, plumbing and electrical, furnace, hot water tank, tubs, stairs, stair lifts, widening doorways. Those are just a few examples that can be covered in that $40,000 loan. There's also the Residential Access Modification Program, or RAMP. And again, that offers the opportunity for people to get up to $7,500 as a grant each year in terms of low-income seniors to help them modify their home so they can stay in it. The government also recognizes that not only is it important to age in place, it's way less expensive to us as a society if we can keep people in our homes, both from a social perspective, a psychological perspective, and an economic perspective. So here are some of the residency requirements and modifications and what the projects are. I can certainly give you the website, or you can Google it and look up those programs. At Unison, we also have a department that will answer all those questions if that's something that you are curious about. They're experts. I'm not, so I'm not going to claim to have all the answers. So what are some of the obstacles to aging in place? Poverty and mental health. Isn't that interesting? When we don't have the money and we don't have the mental health, those are the biggest obstacles to aging in place. Alzheimer's and dementia really, really mess with that, and we never know when that's going to happen. So making sure that people, that either we or our children, are making sure that we have those supports in place. Can't speak highly enough of the need for supportive caregivers. I threw this table in just for interest's sake. If you can no longer stay in your home and you have to move to a level of continuing care, I've just thrown this one chart in here that would be a whole conversation in itself. But understanding the different levels of care. So there's home care, and home care is Alberta Health Services funded, and it helps you stay in your home. So there can be certain things that people can do. So it's really supports for needs that you might have in your home to help you stay safely in your home. Designated supportive living promotes the residents' independence, but they actually live in a home and have access to 24-hour support. So that's with healthcare aides. Long-term care is when you would have the need to have a registered nurse on site 24 hours a day. So those are different levels of care. And again, there's a whole section on AHS to deal with that. I know that there's probably going to be some questions, but I wanted to say thank you. And I hope I didn't talk too fast because I get really excited about this work. So thank you so much. And I'll turn it back over to Karen and Patty.
Well, thank you so much, Karen. I think, what really resonated with me is all the options that are available, and really taking that step back and saying, what are some of the things that we may want to do now? What are some of the things we may want to do in the future? And it's nice to know that there's a variety of things that can be done. I also like the idea of just making things easier for you now. It doesn't even really have to do with aging, like the pull-out drawers and stuff like that. Like that's a fantastic idea to even do now. And then it's just something that, can continue long-term. So I'm so glad that you could present this today and hopefully gives some really good ideas to those that are considering their aging in place options. In terms of how we can help as a team, so one of the things that was mentioned today was just the costs associated. So of course, certain changes will cost more than others. So as an example, Karen highlighted the stair lift. We've had a few clients do that in their homes recently, but we've also had some that have taken the steps to actually install elevators in their home. So the range of costs there is quite a bit different. And so how we can help is really talk about the numbers and really talk about the costs associated with some of these changes. One of the things that we do for all of our clients as part of the services that we provide is an asset, income, and expense projection. So what that really means is taking a look at, what are the sources of income that you have, what are the investment in real estate assets that you have, and what are your planned expenses? So really reinforcing, are you going to run out of money? Are there any worries that you have, or is everything going according to plan? So in terms of some of the aging in place discussions that we've had today, one of the things that we can do is add planned renovation costs to your expense needs. So if you haven't considered that as part of an existing financial projection, we can always integrate that in and take a look at the plan to say, has this changed your plan in a significant way? The other piece that we look at, and this is something that we incorporate in all of our projections, is an estimate for long-term care costs. So our approach to long-term care costs is that it's not necessarily for that transition to a long-term care facility. It may involve things like some of these aging in place costs, or it may involve costs, again, associated with bringing in some extra help. So whether it's for things like the yard work, or whether it's bringing somebody in perhaps to help with cooking or cleaning. So we assume that there's going to be some extra costs in those last 4 years of life. And so that's how we can help, is by integrating those pieces into a holistic financial plan. The other piece that goes part and parcel with that is your investment strategy. So when we have a known planned expense, we always like to make sure that we have a cash reserve in place. So that's perhaps one way that we can amend a plan, is to take a look at, okay, what are some planned modification expenses that you may have, making sure that we have those monies already set to the side in your investment portfolio, so that when you're ready to engage in those, that we've got the funds available for you. And as was mentioned, and I think it's really wise advice, is really thinking about, what's your plan for that home? If this is your forever home, then it may be worth considering, taking some of those extra costs now to really make sure that you don't have to perhaps spend additional monies down the road. We also wanted to take a moment to highlight family householding with our team. One of the things that we do is we work with a select group of families. And so when we do work with a family, we are always opening our services up to those family members. So if the people on the call, if you've got, let's say, a parent or siblings or children that you feel would benefit from our services, we're always happy to, have that introduction and talk about how we can help. I also wanted to highlight some of our upcoming events. So we do have our next event, which is on June 21st, is our mid-year market update. This is going to be a pre-recorded webinar. So this is something that we will be sending out the recording once it's made available. And then we will be resuming our schedule in the fall. So we have a number of upcoming webinars and workshops that we're excited to present to you. So what we'll do now is we'll take a moment and see if any questions have come through throughout our conversations today. So Mike, have we received any questions for either me or Karen? So Karen or Karen?
Well, we have a question for Karen Whiteman, and the question is, could you touch on the importance of qualified contractors in getting estimates? And further, are there any resources available to find and research contractors that specialize in aging in place?
That's a great question, and it's one that all of us worry about when we're hiring contractors, isn't it? So my advice would be, first of all, to do your due diligence like you would with any contractor. There are contractors and that will list themselves as specializing in seniors. still do your due diligence, whether it's the Better Business Bureau. At Unison at Kirby Center, we have a directory of senior services, but we're very careful that we don't actually recommend contractors because we want you to do the due diligence on it. So please check with the Better Business Bureau, or you can call our office and we can give you names of people that want to work with seniors. But we're certainly not going to say, yes, they're Unison recommended.
Mhm.
Sorry, it wasn't more helpful than that.
That's a good start.
I do have one other question, and it relates to the process of getting into one of the levels of continuing care. What is the process? How do you go about that?
First of all, it's very intimidating when you think about the fact that, oh no, I have to go into a senior's home or a different level of care. And what do I do? The good news is that you simply contact Alberta Health Services. And in home care, they will actually help you decide what level of care. They will do an assessment and decide what level of care you might need. They also have transition services that will help you decide, where you want to go, get you on the lists, as they call them, that kind of thing. It's a long process. Again, at Unison, we have a directory with all the seniors housing in Calgary, but generally anything that's a supportive care level, people will actually have to go through AHS to get the placement.
Okay, and that is all the questions I have.
Okay. Well, thank you again, Karen, for taking the time to join us. We were really excited to present this webinar today, and we hope that it's given you some ideas and some tools that you can use to, consider aging in place. So on behalf of the Wagner Investment Management team, thank you again for taking the time to join us today. Take care.